Okay, let's dive right into this. We all love settling in on the couch to watch a great film, right? We completely buy into the illusion that the story unfolding on screen is the exact, pure, untampered vision of the director. But what if I told you that is actually rarely the case? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to peel back the curtain on the Egyptian film industry and look at 5 absolutely iconic Egyptian films that were drastically rewritten at the literal last minute.
Seriously, I want you to take a second and imagine your absolute favorite laugh-out-loud Egyptian comedy. Got it? Okay, now imagine if instead of rolling the credits on a joyous, hilarious note, it ended in utter, complete heartbreak. It kind of shatters the whole illusion, doesn't it? It makes you realize that the movie you paid to see wasn't necessarily the movie that was originally planned out. So what exactly causes this? Well, it's what we call the alternate cut. And to be clear, this isn't about a director just changing their mind in the editing room for, artistic reasons. Not at all. We're talking about unseen industry forces. Think test audiences, massive actor egos, profit-driven producers, and highly unpredictable censors. These forces swoop in right before a movie hits theaters and basically demand a total rewrite. They are the invisible hands that are actually shaping cinematic history behind the scenes. Which brings us to Section 1, when audiences reject sad endings. This is all about the absolute power of the test screening. Let's take a look at the beloved comedy classic El-Limby. Now, as you probably know, it ends with a totally chaotic, happy wedding celebration to help Mohammed Saad's character collect the nota, the monetary gifts. But get this, in the original script, his mother, Fransa, tragically dies right in the middle of the wedding. Yeah, completely wild, right? The main character was forced into this devastating choice. Does he keep the wedding going just to collect the money he desperately needs to pay off his debts, or does he stop the whole shebang to mourn and accept condolences for his mother? So, why on earth didn't we see that tragic ending? Simple. We had a massive audience revolt on our hands. During the test screening, the audience wasn't laughing at all, they were literally weeping. The producers, El-Sabki and El-Hawari, absolutely panicked. I mean, they know a sobbing audience doesn't exactly line up to buy extra popcorn, right? So the tragic ending was instantly scrapped and replaced with the happy one we all know today. But here is a super fascinating piece of trivia for you. The writer, Ahmed Abdallah, loved that original tragic ending so much that he just held onto it. 7 years later, he reused that exact same plot dilemma for the film El Farah, starring Khalid El-Sawi. Moving on to Section 2, Complete Rewrite, Asal Aswid. This is what happens when you are rebuilding a movie from the ground up. Sometimes it's not just the ending. Sometimes the entire foundation of a film gets ripped out. Originally, Asali Aswed wasn't even written for Ahmed Helmi. Can you imagine that? The script was actually built around the absolute legend Omar Sharif, playing a man in his 70s returning to Egypt. So when the lead shifted to Ahmed Helmi, a man in his 30s, the entire narrative tone had to change. They actually shot scenes showing Helmi as a young child leaving Egypt. Those scenes were completely deleted from the final cut, though they did eventually leak online. The dialogue was so heavily altered that it essentially meant the movie was entirely re-envisioned right in the middle of production. And honestly, the most drastic change here was the ending. The original script ended on a highly cynical, really bitter note where the protagonist violently rejects financial help from his friend, played by Edward, and just leaves Egypt behind for good. It was super dark. But the final script, it was a total 180. We got this heartwarming reconciliation where he graciously gives away his apartment and decides he simply cannot leave Egypt. It was a complete pivot purely to ensure the audience walked out of the theater feeling warm and fuzzy. All right, Section 3. Star ego versus the script. This is what happens when the leading man simply refuses to lose. So, what happens when a script makes perfect logical sense, but it clashes with a massive superstar? Let's travel all the way back to the 1973 film Hikayati Ma El Zaman. The legendary Rushdy Abaza played an abusive, cheating husband to the famous singer Wada. Now, in the original script, Wada's character quite rightly leaves her terrible husband and finds love with a kind, supportive director played by Samir Sabri. It makes total sense, it's a perfectly logical arc. But in the final film, she inexplicably abandons the innocent Samir Sabri, who literally did absolutely nothing wrong, and goes right back to her abusive husband, Abaza. The reason for this bizarre change really boils down to one simple quote. No man takes a woman from Rushdy Abaza. At the time, Abaza was getting older, nearing the end of his career, while Samir Sabri was this younger, rising star. Abaza felt incredibly threatened by this. He actually felt that if his character lost the girl to a younger man, his real-life macho image would be completely destroyed. So what did he do? He threw his weight around and threatened to walk off the film entirely, unless the script was rewritten so that he, quote-unquote, won the girl in the end. The perfectly logical story was completely sacrificed just to protect a 1970s leading man's ego. Okay, Section 4, franchise ambitions and open endings. Or to put it another way, why let a character die when they can make you millions? Seriously, why let a story come to a definitive, satisfying conclusion when an open ending can basically guarantee sequel money? Let's look at the modern epic El Jazeera starring Ahmed Al-Saka. The original script, written by the brilliant Mohammed Diab, actually had a definitive, tragic, and highly artistic conclusion. Al-Saka's character, Mansour al-Hefni, was supposed to die at the end alongside Hind Sabri's character. It was a perfectly closed loop. But the final film? It suddenly became incredibly ambiguous. Their fates were deliberately left totally open. This right here is the sequel machine effect in action. The director, Sharif Arafa, actively vetoed the original death scene. He knew for a fact that an open ending guarantees box office returns, simply because it leaves the door wide open for sequels. And hey, it worked. We got Al Jazeera 2, and there are still rumors floating around of a part 3. But we have to acknowledge there is a massive risk here. Stretching a really tight story purely for cash often completely dilutes the legacy of the original masterpiece. We actually saw this exact thing happen with the El Karmoudi comedy franchise. The first film was a massive, incredibly fresh hit, but by forcing a part 2 and 3, the audience just lost interest, and the original's reputation really suffered. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the mystery of Egyptian film censorship, the unpredictable ultimate gatekeeper. Let's use the recent film El Sada El Afadil as a prime case study in these wildly unpredictable standards. On the one hand, you have films like El Selam Wal Taban, which is filled with alcohol consumption and harsh language, or Walad Risk, dealing with very edgy, gritty themes. And both of those, they pass the censors virtually uncut. But then you look at a comparatively mild, really quirky comedy like El Sada Al Afadil, and it gets heavily censored, to the point where its entire ending literally had to be changed. And this isn't just speculation or rumor. Director Karim El-Shanawi flat out confirmed the ending was changed entirely due to these unpredictable censorship rules. Just imagine that for a second. Imagine being part of this incredible cast. We're talking heavyweights like Mohammed Mamdouh, Entisar, and Ashraf Abdelbaki, and having the climax of your film completely dictated by arbitrary, unpredictable guidelines rather than your own artistic vision. So after looking at all of this evidence, we really have to ask ourselves a fundamental question. When you finally sit down in that theater, eyes glued to the big screen, who is really directing the movie you are watching? Because as we've seen, the true directors often aren't the ones with their names on the clapperboard. The final product is molded, shifted, and twisted by weeping test audiences who just refuse to be sad, insecure star egos who absolutely refuse to lose, franchise-seeking producers looking for the next big hit, and completely unpredictable censors. They are the true invisible hands in the editing room. And I think this leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to ponder. When a movie's ending is drastically changed at the 11th hour by all these outside forces, does it ruin the pure art of the film, or is it simply the necessary evil required to save the box office and keep the cinema alive? Honestly, think about that the next time the credits start rolling. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.